They say blood is thicker than water, but in the boardroom of high-stakes tech, blood is just a messy inconvenience. For years, I was the ghost in the kitchen, wiping tomato sauce off a toddler's face, while my sister, Beatrice, wiped the competition off the floor using my brain. I was the unemployed little sister, the live-in nanny who was lucky to have a roof over her head. But while I was stirring soup with one hand, I was rewriting the future of global logistics with the other in a battered spiral notebook. Beatrice thought she was stealing my diary. She didn't realize she was stealing a virus designed to expose her own mediocrity. My name is Maya, and I'm about to show my sister that being a nanny taught me exactly how to deal with spoiled children, even the ones who wear Prada. The air in Beatrice's penthouse always smelled like expensive eucalyptus and condescension. It was a sterile, glass-walled fortress overlooking the city, a place where everything had a price tag, but nothing had a soul. I'd lived here for 18 months, ever since my startup collapsed due to a lack of aggressive leadership, or so the investors said. In reality, I had been outmaneuvered by sharks, and Beatrice, the shining star of Vanguard Solutions, had swooped in to save me. Saving you, in Beatrice's language, meant turning me into a domestic servant. Maya, the twins have soccer at 4, and the organic salmon needs to be poached by 6, Beatrice said, not looking up from her tablet as she adjusted her silk blazer. She looked perfect, a corporate predator in a $1,000 skin. Also, don't forget to organize my study. It's a mess of papers. I have a remote interview at 5, B, I said, wiping a smudge of crayon off the marble countertop. My hands were dry from dish soap, a stark contrast to her manicured nails. Beatrice laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. An interview? For what? A junior coding position? Darling, you're out of the loop. Just focus on the kids. It's the only thing you're actually qualified for right now. Think of it as paying your rent. That was her favorite phrase, paying your rent. She never mentioned that I saved her $6,000 a month in childcare costs, or that I was the one who managed her entire personal life so she could work 80-hour weeks. I waited until she left before I pulled the small black notebook from the hidden compartment in my backpack. It was my sanctuary. While the twins napped, I didn't watch TV or scroll through social media. I designed. I mapped out neural networks for supply chain optimization, ideas that were light years ahead of what Vanguard was doing. I called it the Aegis Protocol. One evening, I was exhausted. The twins had been difficult, the house was a disaster, and I had fallen asleep on the sofa with my notebook open on the coffee table. I woke up at midnight to the sound of the printer in the study. I stood in the doorway and watched Beatrice. She was scanning my pages, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and predatory greed. She didn't see me. She was transfixed by the logic, the elegance of the code, the sheer brilliance of a system that could automate half of her department. "Oh, Maya," she whispered to herself, a terrifying smile spreading across her face. "You really are a genius. It's such a shame you're so soft." The next week, Beatrice was promoted to Senior Vice President of Innovation. The Aegis Protocol, which she renamed the Beatrice Initiative, was hailed as a masterpiece of corporate strategy. She stood on stage at the industry gala, wearing diamonds that cost more than my failed startup, and talked about her sleepless nights and her vision for the future. I watched her from the kitchen of the penthouse, feeding the twins lukewarm pasta. She had taken my notes, but she had only taken the surface-level drafts. She had taken the what, but she didn't understand the how. A few days later, news broke that Vanguard Solutions was being targeted for a hostile takeover by Titan Industries, the largest tech conglomerate in the hemisphere. The market was in a frenzy. Beatrice was panicked. She came home late, throwing her bag on the floor. "They want a full technical audit of the initiative by Friday," she hissed, pacing the living room. The Titan board wants to see the back-end architecture. Maya, I need you to polish the drafts. There are some bugs in the integration." I looked at her, my expression blank, mirroring the obedient sister she thought I was. "I'm sorry, Bea. I've been so busy with the twins' playgroup schedule. I haven't had time to look at my old hobbies lately." "This isn't a hobby. This is my career," she screamed. "If this merger goes through, I'll be on the board of Titan. I'll be able to buy you 10 startups. Just fix the code." "I'll see what I can do," I lied. What I didn't tell her was that I had already been in contact with Titan Industries, but I wasn't talking to them as Beatrice's sister. I was talking to them as their secret weapon. Beatrice thought she was using me to climb the ladder. She didn't realize I'd spent 18 months as a nanny learning exactly how to build a nursery and how to burn a house down. The atmosphere in the penthouse shifted from condescending to desperate within 48 hours. Beatrice stopped treating me like a nanny and started treating me like a malfunctioning piece of hardware that she desperately needed to reboot. She would come home with her hair disheveled, her expensive perfumes replaced by the acrid scent of stress sweat. The technical audit for the merger wasn't just a formality, it was a forensic examination of her soul, and she had nothing to show but my stolen scribbles. "Maya, the integration scripts you wrote for the logistics module, they're throwing fatal errors in the sandbox environment," Beatrice hissed, leaning over my shoulder while I was folding the twins' laundry. She thrust a laptop in front of my face. "Fix it, now. The Titan representatives are coming to the office tomorrow morning for a live demo." I looked at the screen. The code was a mess. It was like watching someone try to perform surgery with a spoon. Beatrice had tried to tweak my draft to make it look like her own work, but in doing so, she had broken the delicate recursive loops that held the entire system together. "It looks complicated, Bea," my voice dripping with faux innocence. "Maybe you should ask your senior engineers? I'm just a nanny, remember? My brain is full of nursery rhymes and grocery lists." "Don't play games with me," she snapped, slamming the laptop shut. "I know you're still in there somewhere, that brilliant, obsessive coder who wouldn't sleep until every line was perfect. I need that girl tonight. If I fail this audit, Vanguard collapses. We lose everything, your home included." "I'll take a look," I whispered, turning back to a pile of socks. "But I can't promise anything. You took the notebook before I could finish the security handshake protocols." That night, while the city lights flickered outside the glass walls, I sat in Beatrice's study. She sat behind me, watching like a hawk, terrified that I would delete the files. I didn't delete them. Instead, I did something much worse. I fixed them exactly the way she wanted. I smoothed out the errors and made the interface look flawless. But beneath the beautiful surface, I embedded a logic bomb, a silent trigger that would only activate when the system connected to an external server, my server. "There," I said at 3 a.m., rubbing my eyes. "It'll run the demo perfectly." "Thank God," Beatrice exhaled, clutching the laptop to her chest like a stolen treasure. She didn't even say thank you. She just walked to her bedroom, already rehearsing her visionary speech for the Titan board. The next morning, she was gone before dawn. I spent the day with the twins at the park, but my mind was elsewhere. I was monitoring the encrypted channel on my burner phone. At 11:15 a.m., I saw the ping. The Vanguard servers had initiated the demo. Beatrice was on stage, probably basking in the awe of the Titan executives, showing them her breakthrough protocol. I sat on a park bench, watching the twins play on the swings, and sent a single encrypted message to an anonymous recipient at Titan Industries. "The architecture you are seeing is a facade. If you want the master key, look for the nanny in the metadata." 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't a message, it was a news alert. Titan Industries announced full acquisition of Vanguard Solutions. Beatrice Vane named Chief Technology Officer of the new subsidiary. My sister had won, or so she thought.
She came home with a bottle of champagne that cost more than my first car. She was radiant, her ego inflated to a point of near explosion. She walked over to me and dropped a stack of $100 bills on the kitchen counter. "For your extra work, Maya," she said, her voice dripping with artificial generosity. "Consider this a bonus. You're lucky I'm so successful. You'll never have to worry about a roof over your head again." "Congratulations, Bia," I said, pocketing the money without looking at it. "I'm sure the new bosses are very impressed with your unique talents." "They are," she smirked, pouring herself a glass of bubbly. "They said they've never seen code so elegant. They're flying the entire board in from the New York headquarters next week for a private dinner to meet their new visionary. And guess what? You're going to cater it. I want them to see how well supported I am." I wouldn't miss it for the world. I looked at the black notebook in my backpack. The one she had stolen was the decoy. The one I held now contained the true Aegis protocol, the version that didn't just optimize logistics, but controlled them. Beatrice was building her throne on a foundation of sand, and I was the one who controlled the tide. The week leading up to the visionary dinner was a masterclass in corporate hubris. Beatrice was no longer just my sister. She was a self-proclaimed deity of the tech world. She spent her days at the office firing anyone who remembered her as a mid-level manager, and her nights barking orders at me about the menu. She wanted understated luxury, dishes that screamed wealth but whispered effortlessness. "Maya, the sea bass needs to be sourced from the specific distributor I messaged you," Beatrice said, examining her reflection in the hallway mirror. "And for heaven's sake, wear the gray uniform I bought you. I want you to look professional, not like you just crawled out of a server room." "Of course, Bia," I replied, stirring a reduction sauce. "I'll be the perfect silent partner, just like always." She didn't catch the irony. She was too busy practicing her modest genius smile. She had no idea that while I was sourcing sea bass, I was also finalizing the handshake between the logic bomb in her stolen code and the Titan Industries internal security audit team. I had discovered that the CEO of Titan, Marcus Thorne, wasn't just a buyer, he was a shark who hated being lied to. And I knew Marcus. We had crossed paths years ago at a hackathon where I took first place and he took second. He wouldn't forget my coding signature. The night of the dinner arrived. The penthouse was transformed into a high-end restaurant. Beatrice buzzed around the living room, rearranging the white orchids and checking the wine temperatures. When the doorbell rang, she took a deep breath, smoothing her dress. "This is it, Maya," her voice tight with ambition. "The moment the world recognizes the Vane name. Don't screw this up." I retreated to the kitchen. The gray uniform felt like a disguise. As the guests arrived, I watched them through the service window. There were 5 of them, the elite of Titan Industries, and in the center was Marcus Thorne. He looked exactly the same, sharp eyes, a tailored suit, and a look of constant, restless calculation. I began serving the first course. I moved like a ghost, placing plates with surgical precision. Beatrice was in full performance mode. "The core of the protocol," Beatrice said, gesturing vaguely with a glass of vintage Chardonnay, "is its ability to predict market fluctuations before they even manifest in the data. It's about intuition translated into machine learning, my intuition." Marcus leaned back, his eyes tracking me as I poured the wine. He didn't say anything, but I saw the flicker of recognition when he looked at my hands that were still calloused from years of typing, not just from scrubbing floors. "It's an impressive system, Beatrice," Marcus said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "But our auditors noticed a strange quirk in the metadata during the final migration, a recurring string of characters, like a nursery rhyme embedded in the encryption headers. Rockabye baby. Care to explain why a multi-billion-dollar logistics engine is humming lullabies?" The color drained from Beatrice's face so quickly it was almost comical. She laughed, a high, nervous sound that grated on the ears. "Oh, that? A little joke from my junior dev team," she lied, her eyes darting toward the kitchen. "I told them to remove it, but you know how sentimental programmers can be. I'll have it scrubbed by Monday." Sentimental, Marcus repeated, swirling his wine. Funny, I've only ever seen that specific encryption style once before. It was at a competition in Zurich 6 years ago. The girl who used it was a ghost. She vanished after her startup was liquidated. I stood in the shadows of the kitchen doorway, holding the tray for the main course. I caught Marcus's eye for a split second. I didn't smile, I didn't nod, I just let him see me. Anyway, Beatrice continued, her voice trembling slightly, the scalability is the real triumph. Once we integrate with Titan's global fleet, the efficiency will increase by 40%. I've already drafted the expansion phase. I'm sure you have, Marcus said, his gaze returning to her. I look forward to seeing the real projects you've been keeping for the next phase, the ones that aren't just drafts. Beatrice froze. The word drafts hit her like a physical blow. She looked at me, her eyes wide with sudden, sharp terror. She realized in that moment that Marcus wasn't just here for dinner, he was here for an inquest. I walked back into the kitchen and sent my last command to the Aegis protocol. Execute full disclosure. Across the city, in the Titan data center, the logic bomb finally detonated. But it didn't destroy anything. It simply began to stream the original dated recordings of my notebook pages, the ones Beatrice had scanned while I was nannying her children, directly onto the Titan boardroom screens. The dinner continued, but the air in the room had turned to ice. Beatrice was still talking, still lying, still building her palace of glass, unaware that the floorboards were already gone.
The main course sat untouched on the table, the expensive sea bass growing cold as the atmosphere in the room turned arctic. Beatrice was mid-sentence, describing the second phase of her expansion plan, when every smart screen in the penthouse flickered and turned a deep, bruised violet. This wasn't part of her choreographed presentation. This was the full disclosure protocol I had spent 18 months weaving into the very fabric of the household she thought she controlled. What is this?" Beatrice stammered, her hand trembling as she reached for her remote. "It must be a server spike. The integration with Titan's grid is still sensitive." "It's not a spike, Beatrice," Marcus Thorne said, his voice terrifyingly calm. He didn't look at the screen. He looked directly at her. "It's a broadcast." The bruised violet screen cleared, replaced with high-resolution scans of my battered black notebook. On the left side of the screen were the lines of code Beatrice had presented to the board as her original vision. On the right side were my handwritten drafts, dated 2 years prior, complete with coffee stains and scribbled notes in the margins about the twins' vaccination schedules. It was a side-by-side forensic deconstruction of a theft. "This is a joke," Beatrice laughed, a shrill, desperate sound. She turned to the guests, her eyes wide with a manic energy. "This is a hack! Maya, come here right now. My sister has always been unstable. She's jealous. She must have planted this to embarrass me." I stepped out of the kitchen, no longer the silent ghost in the gray uniform. I took off the apron and tossed it on a chair. I didn't look like a nanny anymore. I looked like the architect who had finally come to collect her blueprints. "I didn't plant it, Bea," I said, my voice steady and resonant in the silent room. "You see, when you scan someone else's work, you usually miss the invisible layers, the metadata that proves the origin. Every line of code you sold to Titan has a timestamp that matches the hours I spent rocking your children to sleep while you were at networking happy hours." "You little bitch," Beatrice hissed, forgetting the board, forgetting the wine, forgetting the facade. She lunged toward me, but Marcus stood up, his presence cutting through the room like a steel wall. "Sit down, Beatrice," Marcus commanded. He turned back to the screen. "There's more." The display shifted. It began to play audio logs, not from a bug I had planted, but from the nursery monitor I had upgraded months ago. "Oh, Maya, you really are a genius. It's such a shame you're so soft." Beatrice's recorded voice echoed through the penthouse, cold and mocking. "I'll take this.
It's better in my hands. The world doesn't need a nanny's ideas. It needs a star." The silence that followed was deafening. The other 4 board members looked down at their plates as if the sea bass were poisoned. Beatrice sank into her chair, her couture gown suddenly looking like a shroud. She looked at Marcus, her eyes brimming with tears. Tears I knew were shed for her lost career, not for her lost sister. "Marcus, I can explain. The pressure. The firm needed a win. I was going to give her a share of the profits. I was protecting the family." "You weren't protecting the family, Beatrice," Marcus said, leaning over the table. "You were committing corporate espionage and fraud on a scale that will keep Titan's legal team busy for a decade. The merger is void. Your contract is terminated for cause, effective immediately. And the Beatrice initiative," he looked at me, a faint, respectful smirk touching his lips. "It turns out we bought a shell. The real engine is still in the notebook." "Wait!" Beatrice screamed as Marcus stood up to leave. "You can't do this. I have the patents. I signed the filings." "Actually, Bea, I pulled a second, much newer notebook from my pocket, the one she had never seen. Those ideas you stole were just the black box Chernetki, the theoretical laudals. I left the critical logic loops and the security handshakes out of those drafts. The real Aegis protocol, the one that actually functions without the logic bomb, has been filed under a private IP trust for months. You sold them a car with no engine, and you gave me the keys to the entire fleet." Marcus paused at the door. He looked at me, then at the wreckage of my sister's ambition. "Maya, I think we need to have a very different dinner, somewhere far away from this penthouse." "I'd like that." As the board members filed out, Beatrice remained at the table, surrounded by cold fish and dying orchids. She looked at me, her face twisted with a hatred so pure that it was almost beautiful. "You ruined me," she whispered. "I gave you a home. I fed you." "No, Bea," I said, picking up my backpack. "I fed you. For 18 months I fed your children, your ego, and your lies. Now the kitchen is closed." I walked out of the penthouse without looking back. I had been a nanny for billions, but I was finally through with babysitting.
The transition from the penthouse kitchen to the glass-walled executive suite at Titan Industries felt like jumping from a simmer into a deep fry. I was no longer Maya, the live-in nanny. I was Maya Vane, the chief architect of the Aegis Protocol. I had my own team, an unlimited budget, and the direct ear of Marcus Thorne. But the ghost of Beatrice didn't just vanish. She had spent years building a narrative of my instability, and now that she was drowning, she decided to drag me down with her by using the very children I had raised as anchors. "Maya, you have a visitor in the lobby. She says it's an emergency involving your nephews," my assistant Sarah said, her voice hesitant. She knew the history. Everyone at Titan knew the history now. I went down to the lobby. Beatrice was waiting, looking like a shattered version of her former self. Her designer suit was wrinkled, and her eyes were red-rimmed. She wasn't holding a laptop this time. She was holding the hands of the twins. The boys looked confused, their small faces pale in the sterile corporate environment. "They've been asking for you, Maya," Beatrice said, her voice trembling with a forced, pathetic vulnerability. "I can't afford the school fees anymore. The accounts are frozen. We're being evicted from the penthouse. Is this what you wanted? To see your own blood on the street?" I looked at the twins. My heart ached for them. I had wiped their tears, read them to sleep, and been their only constant for 18 months. Beatrice knew this. She was weaponizing my empathy, the very trait she used to call my softness. "Don't do this, Bea," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "Don't use the kids as a shield for your fraud. You had $1 million in your personal savings 6 months ago. Where did it go?" "Legal fees," she hissed, her mask of vulnerability slipping for a second. "Titan is suing me for every cent I ever made. They're trying to destroy me.
You have to tell them to stop. You have the power now. Tell Marcus to drop the charges, or I'll tell the press that you've been plotting this for years, that you're the one who sabotaged Vanguard from the inside. I didn't sabotage Vanguard, B. I just stopped fixing the holes you kept digging, I replied. I knelt to the twins' level. Hey, boys, go with Sarah to the cafeteria, okay? She has the best chocolate muffins. I need to talk to your mom for a minute. Once the kids were out of earshot, I turned back to Beatrice. The coldness in my chest felt like a reinforced firewall. Listen to me very carefully, I said. I've already set up a private trust for the boys. Their tuition, their health care, and a modest apartment for them are covered. But the money is tied to an independent guardian. You won't touch a single penny of it. If you try to use them in a press stunt, or if you ever bring them to my office again to beg, I'll release the rest of the audio logs, the ones where you complain about how boring and expensive they are while you were out at the clubs. Beatrice stepped back as if I had slapped her. You wouldn't. Try me. I'm not the nanny anymore, remember? I'm the unstable sister who knows exactly where all your bodies are buried. You have 24 hours to move into the apartment the trust provided. After that, any contact with me goes through Titan's legal department. I walked back into the elevator, my hands shaking only slightly. I went straight to Marcus's office. He was standing at the window, looking out at the city. Your sister is a persistent variable, Maya. My lawyers want to push for a criminal indictment. It would make the Aegis brand look cleaner if we distance ourselves from her fraud completely. She's already finished, Marcus, I said, sitting in the leather chair across from his desk. But the children are innocent. I want the lawsuits against her personal assets to be capped. Take the house, take the car, but leave her enough to stay out of prison. I don't want to build my legacy on her total destruction. Marcus turned, his eyes searching mine. You're still soft, Maya. In this industry, that can be a fatal bug. It's not softness, Marcus, I replied, meeting his gaze. It's architecture. A structure that's too rigid will shatter under stress. I'm building something that lasts, and that means knowing when to stop the demolition. Marcus smiled, a rare, genuine expression. Then let's get back to work. We have a global launch in 2 weeks, and the world is waiting to see if the nanny's ideas really can change everything. I left his office and went back to my lab. I looked at the black notebook on my desk. Beatrice thought she had stolen my power, but she had only stolen my shadow. Now the sun was finally out, and I was the one holding the light. But as I watched the data streams flicker across the monitors, I saw a strange anomaly, a small, hidden piece of code in the Aegis core that I hadn't written. Someone was watching me. Not Beatrice. Someone bigger. The night before the global launch of the Aegis protocol, the Titan headquarters felt less like a tech company and more like a war room. I sat in my office, the blue light of the monitors reflecting in the dark glass of the windows. The anomaly I had detected earlier, the hidden trace of code in the core, wasn't a bug. It was a backdoor installed by Titan's own security team under Marcus Thorne's direct orders. It was a classic corporate move. They wanted my brain, but they also wanted a kill switch in case I became too difficult to manage. You're working late, Maya. Marcus's voice came from the doorway. He was holding 2 glasses of scotch. He looked like the king of the world, but I saw the slight tension in his jaw. He knew that I knew. I was just admiring the craftsmanship, Marcus, I said, not turning around. The way your team tried to mirror my encryption style for the back door. It's almost flattering, but you forgot one thing about my logic. I don't build houses without knowing where the foundations are buried. Marcus walked over and placed a glass on my desk. It's not personal, Maya. It's risk management. The Aegis protocol is going to control 40% of global logistics by tomorrow morning. I can't leave that kind of power in the hands of one person, no matter how much I respect them. I expected better from you, I said, finally looking at him. You saw what Beatrice did by trying to own what she didn't build. You're doing the same thing, just with better lawyers and a more expensive suit. I'm not stealing it, Maya, Marcus countered. I'm protecting the investment. Now let's go to the gala. The world is waiting for the nanny who saved the supply chain. The launch gala was held at the Museum of Modern Art. It was a sea of black ties, diamonds, and the nauseating smell of unearned success, the same atmosphere Beatrice used to thrive in. As I stood on the stage, the spotlight was blinding. I looked out into the crowd and saw Beatrice standing at the very back, near the service entrance. She wasn't invited, but I knew she wouldn't miss the moment of my supposed ascension. She looked hollowed out, a ghost of her former vanity. Marcus stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, ready to present the Titan-Aegis merger to the press. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice booming through the hall, "today we don't just launch a product, we launch a new era of human efficiency, and it started with one woman's vision." "Actually, Marcus," I interrupted, stepping toward the microphone, I felt the cold, sharp clarity that had carried me through 18 months of nursery rhymes and stolen notebooks. I tapped a command into the tablet I was holding. On the giant screen behind me, the Aegis protocol didn't show its usual logistics dashboard. Instead, it displayed the source code of the back door Marcus had tried to hide. It showed his signature, his authorization, and his attempt to tether my work to his control. "The Aegis protocol is now open source," I announced to the stunned crowd. "I've decentralized the core. No one owns it. Not Titan, not Beatrice, and not me. It belongs to the network. The back doors are closed. The keys are deleted." The room exploded into a frenzy of camera flashes and shouting. Marcus's face went from triumph to a mask of pure, murderous rage in seconds. He had spent billions to own a monopoly, and I had just made it public property. "You've destroyed the value of the company," Marcus hissed, his voice trembling as he stepped away from the mic. "You've ruined us." "No, Marcus," I whispered. "I've made it indestructible. You wanted to manage the risk? The risk is now gone, and so am I." I walked off the stage, past the security guards who didn't know whether to stop me or let me through, and straight toward the service entrance. I stopped in front of Beatrice. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of awe and hatred. "You gave it away," Bea said, her breath trembling. "All that power, you just gave it away for free." "I didn't give it away, Bea," I said, looking her in the eye for the last time. "I just put it where you can never, ever touch it again. I'm through being a nanny for your kids and for these corporate toddlers who think the world is their playroom." I walked out into the cool New York night. My phone buzzed with 1,000 notifications, lawsuits, death threats, job offers, and messages of support. I ignored all of them. I walked to a small, quiet park a few blocks away and sat on a bench. For the first time in years, my backpack was empty. No stolen notebooks, no hidden agendas, no nursery rhymes to decode. I picked up a fresh, clean notebook from my pocket. It was blank. I picked up a pen and wrote a single word on the first page. Home. I wasn't a nanny. I wasn't a ghost. I was finally, for the first time in my life, the sole architect of my own future. System overwritten. Final version saved.